Thanks for joining in. I mentor cloud, another episode on cloud security, and it's part of the series of episode on Azure security. Today's this particular slide deck and episode is special because it does not only work on Microsoft, but it's an overall Azure security best practices. And somehow it's also ties and work with Sentinel. It can be any SIEM. That's why I let it like part of Azure Sentinel tutorial. But again, basically it's an overall Azure security best practices. And it's part 00 because it's one of its kind which works across Azure security, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. As well as it will also help you understand if you have different cloud environment, AWS and GCP, pretty much you have to apply the same concept, because as soon as you move from on-premises infrastructure to cloud, the security posture of an organization changes. So basically, behind the firewall, you have different approach, different controls, and different mindset. As soon as you move to the cloud, this is not your data center anymore. And it really changes when it comes to SaaS, because you have very less of a control in a SaaS versus PaaS and IaaS. If you look back to a shared responsibility model, in some of my previous videos, it says you have less responsibility. You have only application level access versus PaaS and SaaS where you get more access. So it's you as a cloud customer versus cloud service provider. It's really a different roles and responsibility. So I'm going to cover a best practices for you where we can look into that, and it's not necessarily has to do with Azure, but it can be any cloud environment. So one of them here is the good basic principle is encryption at rest and in transit. And it is very important for you to understand when it comes to data, because in your data center, if it's an old data center, for example, you probably have an encrypted disk on your server, maybe on your databases. But as soon as move your data to cloud, so you have to make sure that cloud has encryption, because you don't want to put your data in the cloud which is not encrypted, because then itself is a huge risk, because in the environment where you have access to firewalls and the data center is physically located, so you control at different layers. For somebody to get into your systems and server, you have many segmentation, many firewalls. But as soon as you spin up a VM for data in the cloud, or you have any platform as a service databases, or maybe if you have some SaaS, so there are scenarios where you have to be very careful. Mostly it works on infrastructure as a service, where you have to make sure the data at encryption at rest, you must set it up. And in transit will work when you move the data, basically. Right, when you move your data from on premises to the cloud through file transfer protocol, FTP, or any other transfer mechanism, you have to make sure it's also encrypted in transit. There are many different ways of doing it, but you have to make sure the data leaves your organization is not clear text. It has to be encrypted, and which works across any platform like Microsoft Azure or AWS and GCP. Now the second one, we have restrict to resources and databases. What it means is that if you are managing a infrastructure as a service, what it means is if you're managing your VMs or Windows client, for example, Linux, whichever, it can be any VM you spin up in your environment, in your cloud environment. How do you make sure the access is restricted, right? There could be some machines running domain controllers, some directories, databases. It can be running anything. So you have to make sure what are the controls you have which can restrict access to those resources. It can even be object storage or your regular storage in any cloud environment, as well as you have databases. It could be a database on a VM, or it could be a database cluster in a platform as a service. So you have to make sure access restriction policies are configured. Same back to the restrict access to the VM, as I just said. Resources and VMs, kind of difference, but again, generally they are all resources, but resources we are talking about file, objects, and all those resources, where VM, it could be in VM level restrict need to apply. So yeah, there are different policies available where you can set different policies on resources and databases versus have a restriction on a VM. Next come the access to the application secrets. So if you have developers developing some applications for your internal use, external use, internet facing website, whichever the case would be, there are some application secrets which you also need to make sure, because those application secrets should only be available to those party and not to everyone. I'll give you so the scenario program, hey, we need to have this application to be published. So basically a token, a generic application secret ID, client ID, and all that stuff that needs to be created, and that access has to be allowed, the request coming from the known location. This is totally a different new concept when it comes to cloud versus your on-premises. Here is the very common one. Doesn't really matter you work for a smaller company or large organization. I have seen myself many times in any large organization. There are different teams like engineering team, operations team, and then they have QA and sandbox environment, so many different environments. So for that reason, if you are running production application, you want to make sure production application, any misconfigured application or any particular patch, these things can really cause downtime. Imagine if you are running a web server and you apply the patch which was released last night or last week, and without testing it in the environment, you don't know what this patch is going to do, because every application is customized. There are chances, so that particular patch, maybe it works for other businesses, could cause a downtime to you. So this is not good, right? So in that scenarios, it is highly recommended to have at least more than one. If you can afford, then have multiple environment, depending on the size of the organization or the nature of the application. So that's why you got to have a different subscription. So you can have one subscription just dedicated for the production and nothing else, and you can have another separate subscription, totally separate subscription, just for the dev and test and queue and all that. So again, this is one of the best strategy, and it can be set up in any kind of cloud, AWS or GCP or Microsoft Azure. Now we have something called web application firewalls. It does a lot of good work. So if you're publishing some application on internet, it can work as an application gateway. It can work as a reverse proxy. It can also work as protect you basically against web attacks. For example, OWASP 10, so SQL injection or trust script side, all those. So these WAFs are having predefined logic, so you must deploy those in front of your internet facing application, and WAF will take care of that. If see anything suspicious, something which is not normal, if there is some attacker launching attack, WAF really can play a very good role and protect your application. And finally is Azure Security Center. Before I get into that, let me show you the WAF. So here's the WAF basically. So cross-site scripting and SQL injection, as you can see, is a layer 7 load balancer there behind the WAF. So a request comes to your application, which is WAF, and from there it's working as a load balancer, and you can literally send your requests to different sites depending how you configure what's the load and everything. But your point is that WAF or Web Application Gateway, WAF, is in front. This is where you have to put your DNS and everything set up and point to, and this will become your first point of contact before anything hits your application on site 1, site 2, in your cloud environment or whichever hybrid, depending. So this is where the WAF makes the most sense. Now, if you wanted to see the overall security posture of your organization, this is where Azure Security Center comes in. If you want to see what's the overall score, like a credit score looks like for your organization, like from identity, from a storage piece of it, from things what we have covered, like access policies and everything. So if you want to look at the overall posture, security posture, Azure Security Center can give you very good detail about your environment, as you can see here, what it looks like. So it always depends how many resources you have deployed. So if you're a brand new environment, you may not see it, but as you grow and develop, you can see and sort it based on different criteria. Like you can look at networking, you can compute and apps and data, identity and access. So it's one of the very best way to have a 360-degree view of your organization when it comes to security. So that's in a nutshell. I wanted to share with you. Let me know in the comments what do you think. If you have already started using this feature, whichever the cloud environment you have, do you look into the security? Have you applied these security controls or not? So let me know. Till then, I'll see you in my next video. Thanks for tuning in, and bye.